Let me ask you something. If a stranger showed up at your door during a storm, soaked to the bone, holding a little girl in his arms, would you let them in? Would you trust your gut? Or close the door and pretend you didn't hear the knock? What would you do? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, we'd love to know. Because that night, she made her choice. It was one of those cold, biting rains. The kind that makes the world feel quieter, heavier, like it's holding its breath. She was home, wrapped in her favorite hoodie, tea going cold on the table, staring out the window, not expecting anything, but somehow still waiting. Then, a knock. Soft, hesitant, like someone wasn't sure they deserved to be heard. She paused, listened. Another knock, this time slower, heavier. Not loud, but it stayed with her, like it meant something. She opened the door. And that's when everything changed. He stood there, rain pouring off him. Dark eyes, tired shoulders, silent. And in his arms, a little girl. So small, so still, her cheek pressed to his chest like she hadn't spoken in hours. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She stepped aside. "Come in," she whispered. "You'll catch your death out there." One quiet moment. One open door. That's all it took. She didn't know it yet. But the man she had just let into her home wasn't just lost. He wasn't just a father trying to survive the night. He was her future. And by morning, he'd walk into her office, wearing a suit. As her new CEO, the door closed behind them with a soft click. And just like that, she wasn't alone anymore. She moved quietly, almost instinctively, grabbing towels from the hallway cabinet, a warm blanket from the couch. She didn't ask questions, because something about them felt sacred. The man said nothing at first. Just stood there, dripping on her hardwood floor, clutching his daughter like she might disappear if he let go. The little girl looked up at her, wide-eyed and pale. Not afraid. Just tired. Like she'd seen more than a child ever should. "What's your name, sweetheart?" the woman asked softly, kneeling down with a towel. The girl hesitated. Then whispered, "Lena." Her voice was barely louder than the rain outside. "And you?" she asked the man. He hesitated longer. "Daniel." One word. No last name. No story. Just Daniel. She didn't push. She could see it in his eyes, he wasn't ready. So instead, she turned back to Lena. Wrapped her in the towel, helped her out of her soaked jacket, then gently pulled the blanket around her small shoulders. "Let's get you warm, yeah?" The girl nodded. Minutes later, they were gathered in her tiny living room. The heater hummed. A candle flickered. And the storm still howled beyond the windows. She poured hot soup into mismatched bowls. Laid out a couple slices of bread. It wasn't much, but it was something. Daniel sat silently as Lena ate, her hands trembling just enough to break your heart. And every so often, he'd glance at the woman. Like he wasn't sure whether to thank her or warn her. She noticed the way he watched her bookshelf. Her old framed photo on the wall. Her worn blanket folded neatly on the armrest. He was taking it all in. Not judging, just noticing. And still, he said almost nothing. Until she finally asked, "Do you have somewhere to go when the rain stops?" A long pause. Then, "No. That's all. Just, no." He wasn't asking for pity. He wasn't even asking to stay. He was just telling the truth. She nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "You don't have to explain anything tonight." Lena had fallen asleep on the couch by then, curled up like a kitten under the blanket. One hand still holding a crust of bread, her face finally soft and peaceful. Daniel's gaze softened. "She hasn't slept like that in days," he murmured. His voice cracked slightly when he said it. Like he hadn't heard his own voice in a while. She looked at him differently then. Not just as a stranger, but as a father. One who was clearly running on fumes, holding it together with nothing but sheer will. "You can stay," she said gently. "Just for tonight." He didn't thank her right away. Didn't smile. He just nodded. And in that nod, there was something like relief. But also fear. As if accepting help came with its own kind of weight. She laid out fresh sheets on the pull-out couch. Gave him a spare hoodie and sweatpants from her brother's old box. Then turned off the lights. The room dimmed, and the rain outside didn't seem so loud anymore. As she climbed into her own bed down the hall, she stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself. "What am I doing?" Because the truth is, she never did things like this. She wasn't reckless. She didn't let strangers in. But something about tonight had shifted. Something about them felt unfinished. Like fate had opened the door before her mind could catch up. And she couldn't explain it. Not yet. But even though she barely knew his name, she already knew the weight of his silence. And something in her gut said, this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Morning came. But it felt like waking up inside a dream she couldn't explain. Her apartment was quiet. Still. Almost too still. She walked down the hall, blanket draped over one arm. But the couch was empty. No Daniel. No Lena. No trace they'd ever been there. Except the blanket folded neatly. The dishes washed. And a note, scribbled in careful handwriting, sitting on her kitchen table. "Thank you. For the warmth. For the silence. For letting us just exist. D." She stood there for a long time, just holding that note. She didn't know if she'd ever see them again. Didn't know why it mattered so much that they were gone. But it did. Because something about their presence had made her little apartment feel fuller than it had in years. She shook it off. She had work to get to. The city looked different that morning. Like the storm had scrubbed it clean overnight. She caught her reflection in the elevator glass. And for a second, she almost didn't recognize herself. Maybe it was the way her mind kept drifting. To the way Lena had fallen asleep so quietly. Or the way Daniel had looked at her, like he wasn't used to kindness. When she stepped into the office, everything felt tense. Buzzing with a kind of nervous energy. People were whispering. Fixing their hair. Checking their teeth in mirrored surfaces like it was some kind of inspection day. She caught the eye of her friend in accounting. Raised an eyebrow. "Did I miss something?" Her friend leaned in and whispered. "New CEO starts today. Big changes coming. Apparently, he's a total shark." She gave a half laugh. Of course. Another executive in a long line of suits who probably wouldn't remember her name. She walked to her desk, sat down, and tried to shake the weirdness off. But then the elevator dinged. And everything around her seemed to pause. He stepped out. Dry. Composed. Dark tailored suit. Polished shoes. Sharp jaw. Clean-shaven. It was him. Daniel. Except, not the Daniel she knew. This man didn't look lost. He didn't look exhausted or weighed down. He looked like he owned the floor. Her heart dropped. Her stomach flipped. She blinked, hard, wondering if she was seeing it wrong. But no. It was him. And his eyes? They flicked to her for a split second. Just long enough to acknowledge. Just long enough to freeze her in place. Then he looked away. No smile. No nod. Not a word. Just nothing. Like last night had never happened. Like she was no one. He walked straight to the conference room. People stood when he entered. The same man who sat quietly in her living room just hours ago. was now commanding a room full of executives without blinking. She felt the blood drain from her face. She wasn't sure what to feel. Confused? Betrayed? Embarrassed? All she knew was that something about his silence this time hurt more than it did in the rain. An hour later, her name flashed on her screen. Meeting request, 11:15 a.m., CEO's office. She stared at it for a full minute. Was it a coincidence? A formality? Or something else? Her feet carried her to his office on autopilot. She knocked once. "Come in," he said. His voice was calm, controlled. She stepped in. And there he was. Behind a glass desk. Stacks of folders. Coffee steaming beside him. Not even looking up. Then, close the door. Her heart thudded. She did. He looked at her finally. And for just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Something softer. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "We don't talk about last night, understood?" She stared at him, trying to find the man who wrapped a child in blankets on her couch. Trying to see Daniel in this person who now sat behind polished wood and corporate armor. "Understood?" he repeated. She nodded, slowly. But inside, 1,000 questions swirled. Who was this man, really? Why did he pretend like she didn't exist just moments ago? Why did his daughter cling to her like she'd known her forever? And what exactly had she just stepped into? Because this wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It was something else entirely. Something dangerous. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over. The morning after the CEO reveal felt like walking into a different dimension. Yesterday, she was just helping a man and his little girl stay warm and dry. Today, that man was walking past her office door with a team of executives trailing him like shadows. And Emma? She was trying to look busy while her heart thudded against her ribs like a warning bell. She didn't want to make eye contact. She didn't want to be noticed. She definitely didn't want him to stop. But of course, he did. He paused at her desk. Cool. Composed. Wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Miss Carter," he said, with the faintest flicker of a smile, "could I see you in my office?" Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. She nodded, swallowing every emotion that threatened to rise. When she stepped into his corner office, it was like entering a different world. Glass walls. City views. Silence so thick you could feel the tension pressing into your skin. But it wasn't just the room that felt off. It was him. He wasn't the same man who'd crouched beside his daughter on her living room floor, trying to warm her hands with his own. He wasn't the guy who'd asked if he should take his boots off before stepping inside. This version of him? He was all steel, all structure. And yet, his eyes, they lingered on her face like he was remembering the softness of last night. Like he didn't quite know how to be both things at once, her rescuer and her boss. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for what you did. For Lily. For me." Emma blinked. It was the first time he'd said his daughter's name aloud in the office. She hesitated. Of course, any decent person would have done the same. "Not everyone would," he replied quietly. There was a pause. A long one. He wasn't dismissing her. He wasn't assigning her a task. He was just looking at her. And suddenly, the power dynamics in the room felt messy. Because she wasn't sure if she was being admired, or evaluated, appreciated, or tested. She hated that her chest warmed under his gaze. She hated that the silence between them felt less like a pause, and more like a possibility. But before she could make sense of it, someone knocked on the glass door. His assistant, brisk and all business. "Sir, the London call is waiting." Just like that, the moment shattered. He nodded once. "We'll talk again, Miss Carter." She walked out, heart pounding, mind spinning. The man behind the desk wasn't just a CEO. He was a contradiction. And Emma was beginning to realize the real danger wasn't helping him that night. The real danger was what she might feel the next time he called her in. And something in her gut whispered, this was only the beginning. They say office walls have ears. But Emma was starting to think the whispers came from deeper places. Invisible corners. Hallway glances. Laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. The air had changed since the night she helped Lily and her father. And not in a good way. It started small. A few side eyes during meetings. A couple of missed emails that mysteriously never got to her. Someone forgetting to invite her to a department update. At first, she thought she was overthinking it. Maybe she was just being paranoid. But then, her desk was moved. Without notice. Her login started glitching. And worst of all, her name was quietly removed from a project she'd been leading for 3 weeks straight. No explanation. No heads up. Just gone. Emma confronted her direct supervisor, Melissa, who smiled too sweetly and said, "Oh, I thought you knew. The CEO said we're restructuring some things." The CEO. He'd said nothing to her about it. Not a word. Not a warning. Not even a nod in the hallway. Was this how it started? The power shift? Was he protecting her from office politics? Or quietly pulling away? That night, Emma stayed late. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just needed to breathe without eyes on her. But as she was shutting down her computer, she heard voices in the break room. Sharp. Rushed. Low enough to suggest secrecy, but loud enough to catch a name. Hers. She froze. Should have never been at that house. That's why she's in his good graces. Trust me. She's playing it perfectly. Quiet little savior. Probably hoping for a promotion, or more. Laughter. Cruel. Knives dipped in honey. Emma's throat tightened. She stepped away silently. They didn't see her. But their words? They sank in. It wasn't just jealousy. It was sabotage. Someone, maybe multiple someones, wanted her gone. Not because she did something wrong, but because she dared to be seen by him. And that's when it hit her. It didn't matter that she'd acted with kindness. That she helped a cold, frightened child. That she hadn't asked for any of this. In an office like this, perception was currency. And her account was overdrawn. Still, she refused to fold. Emma began documenting everything. Every strange tech issue. Every accidental exclusion. Every snide comment laced with a smile. She kept it in a folder labeled Pet Project, just in case. Because deep down, Emma knew something was brewing. And the storm this time? It wasn't outside, with thunder and rain. It was inside. Right here. Between the desks, the egos, and the ambition. A war she hadn't asked for. But one she might have no choice but to fight. What would you do if the kindness you showed became a weapon in someone else's hand? There's a moment. Right before the truth reveals itself. When your gut already knows. Emma had been feeling it for days. This strange, tight flutter in her chest. Like standing too close to the edge of something. Something that might be real, but could just as easily shatter her if she leaned in. It wasn't just admiration anymore. It wasn't just gratitude for the man who'd quietly stepped into her life with all his sharp suits and soft words. It was something more now. And it terrified her. Because once feelings cross that invisible line, they become facts. Unavoidable. Undeniable. And facts. They demand action. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Emma had stayed late again. Not because she had to, but because the office felt different after hours, quieter. Safer, like the masks came off. She was packing up when the elevator dinged behind her. She turned. And there he was. The CEO. Liam Rhodes. The man in the corner office. But this time, he wasn't polished. His tie was loose. His sleeves rolled. There was a tiredness behind his eyes that hadn't been there before. He looked human. Unshielded. "I was hoping you'd still be here," he said, stepping into her office space like he belonged there. Emma's voice caught. "Everything okay?" He paused, leaning against the doorway. Then, he did something unexpected. He sighed. Deep. Heavy. Like he was laying something down. "My daughter talks about you," he said. "All the time. She says you make her feel like her mom used to." Emma's breath hitched. "She said you smell like warm books and strawberries," he chuckled softly. "And that you saved her." Emma looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "She saved me too. You both did." Silence. Then, he stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough that the air between them shifted. "You're not like anyone else here," he said. "I know people are talking. I should have said something sooner. I just didn't want to make things harder for you." Emma looked up. "Why would it make things harder?" Another beat. Because now the pause between them wasn't just professional. It wasn't just polite. It was personal. "It's not easy," he said, "when people think you're getting attention for the wrong reasons." That hurt. Because he was right. "But then," he added, "and it's even harder when the reason is something real." Emma's heart slammed against her ribs. He wasn't just talking about perception. He wasn't talking about them. He was talking about her. And him. And something neither of them had dared name. After he left, she sat at her desk for almost an hour. Staring at the door he'd walked through. She hadn't touched him. He hadn't asked to. But the look in his eyes. That soft unraveling of restraint. It said more than any confession ever could. Emma knew then. This wasn't just a passing crush. This wasn't a moment of loneliness disguised as attraction. This was something dangerous. Because feelings could be hidden. But facts? Facts changed things. And this one? This fact that had bloomed quietly between boardrooms and coffee cups? It was about to change everything. If you were Emma, would you take the risk? Or walk away before it becomes too real? Power isn't always about who speaks the loudest. Sometimes. It's in who stays standing when everything else falls apart. And right now, Emma was barely on her feet. After that night. That quiet, slow-burning conversation with Liam in her office. Nothing felt the same. She started noticing things. The long stares across meeting tables. The subtle softening in his voice when he spoke only to her. The way his daughter would light up when Emma walked into the room, like she'd found home in someone new. It should have been beautiful. It was beautiful. But beauty, in the wrong setting, can feel like a trap. The rumors got worse. It wasn't whispers anymore. It was glares in the hallway. Lunches cut short when she entered the break room. Her name, paired with his, written in dry erase marker on the back of the women's bathroom stall. She never thought a bathroom wall could make her cry. But there she was. Frozen in the stall, staring at those words like they'd been etched into her skin instead of plastic. Sleeping her way up. Watch out, she's got the boss wrapped. No signature. No face. Just venom. It didn't matter that none of it was true. It didn't matter that she hadn't so much as brushed Liam's hand. Because when people want a story to be true, they'll find a way to make it hurt. Emma didn't tell Liam. She couldn't. Because what if they were right? What if, despite all her hard work, all the late nights and sacrificed weekends, the only reason anyone saw her now was because of him? That thought. That tiny, cruel possibility. It cracked something in her. But pain has a strange way of showing you where your power lies, so she stopped apologizing. She stopped shrinking herself in meetings just to make others comfortable. She brought ideas to the table that scared her, big, bold, untested ideas. And when someone tried to take credit for one of her pitches, she didn't smile politely. She spoke up. Calm, controlled, but unmistakably clear. "I came up with that. Let's make sure credit lands where it's earned." It stunned the room. "And Liam?" He just nodded. Once. Solid. Proud. Later that day, he slipped a sticky note under her keyboard when she wasn't looking. 5 words. "Don't dim. Ever. Got it?" She read it 3 times before tucking it into her planner like a secret promise. Because something was happening. Between her and the work. Between her and herself. And yes, between her and him. It wasn't perfect. Power never is. It came with pain. With isolation. With second-guessing herself at 2 a.m. while curled up on her kitchen floor. But it also came with possibility. Possibility that she didn't have to choose between being brilliant and being wanted. That she could be both. That she already was both. And the world just needed to catch up. So when Liam invited her to the annual executive dinner, and asked, quietly, as a guest, not staff, "You don't have to say yes," she paused. She didn't blush. She didn't panic. She met his gaze and simply said, "Okay." It wasn't a confession. Not quite. But it was something braver. A possibility. Finally becoming real. Would you have gone to that dinner? Or would the risk still feel too high? Time didn't change everything. But it changed enough. The dinner came and went, with silverware clinking gently beneath murmured conversations and the soft lull of jazz in the background. And when Emma walked in, not behind Liam, not beside him, but separately, in her own spotlight, something shifted in the room. Heads turned. Not because she was scandalous, but because she was unignorable. She wasn't the assistant anymore. She wasn't the whispered about woman in the hallway. She was Emma. And for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, she felt like that was enough. They didn't kiss that night. There was no grand gesture. No dramatic music swelling in the background. But after the last glass was cleared, and the laughter had thinned into a quiet buzz, he walked her to her car. No pressure. No games. Just presence. And before she opened the door, he said, softly, "Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." And she believed him. Not because he was charming. Not because he had power. But because, finally, so did she. Weeks turned into months. Work evolved. So did they. The scandal faded. The stares stopped. Emma didn't rise the way people expected. She rose higher. Not because of Liam. Not even in spite of him. But with him. At a distance that felt safe, until it didn't have to be anymore. Their first real date wasn't glamorous. It was tacos in a parking lot after a long strategy meeting, their shoes off, feet on the dashboard, her eyeliner smudged, his tie hanging loose. She laughed so hard she dropped guacamole on her blouse. He didn't say a word, just handed her his napkin and smiled like she was the whole sky. That's when she knew. Not because of butterflies. But because of the calm. Because when love is real, it doesn't set you on fire. It builds you a house. Brick by brick. Strong enough to stand in. Quiet enough to hear your own voice. He never tried to outshine her. She never had to shrink. They argued sometimes. Of course they did. But even then, the ground stayed level. Because that's what they promised, without ever needing the words. Love. On equal terms. Years later. A new office. A different city. Emma's name on the glass. CEO. No asterisks. No, but she used to. Just her. And on her desk, a tiny frame. Inside it, a yellowed sticky note. 5 faded words. Don't dim. Ever. Got it? She never did. And maybe that's the lesson. Maybe the love story wasn't about being saved, but about being seen. Not for what she could offer. Not for how well she played quiet. But for who she already was. Brilliant. Resilient. Whole. So if you're watching this right now, wondering if you're too much or not enough, or if the world will ever let you rise without clipping your wings first, this is your sign. Don't dim. Ever. Got it? If this story left a mark on you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments. Have you ever loved someone on equal terms? Wherever you are. Whoever you are. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, you're not the background character. Not anymore. Not all storms are here to break us. Some arrive to wake us up. To shake the dust off the life we thought we wanted. And point us quietly toward the life we needed. When Liam knocked on Emma's door that night, neither of them knew what they were about to walk into. He didn't come looking for love. She wasn't searching for anything. She just opened her door, because it felt like the right thing to do. Funny how fate works like that. No grand signs. Just one small, open door in the middle of a storm. Looking back, it wasn't the soup. Or the blanket. Or even the kindness that changed everything. It was the moment she saw him. Really saw him, without judgment, without expectation. And in that same moment, he saw her, too. People think love is lightning. But sometimes, it's just a quiet shelter. A place to land. A voice that doesn't flinch when you speak your truth. Arms that don't tighten, but open. She didn't fix him. And he didn't save her. What they built was something different. Mutual. Gentle. True. And it only happened because the storm pushed them in the same direction. If you're going through one right now, a hard season, a silent ache, a chapter you wouldn't wish on anyone, maybe it's not here to ruin you. Maybe it's here to lead you home. So tell me, have you ever had a storm that changed everything? Tell us in the comments. Or better yet, tell us your turning point. You never know who might need to read it today. Seriously, we love seeing our little story circle grow across the world. If this story stayed with you even for a moment, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV for more stories that feel like conversations and leave footprints behind. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay kind, stay open. And remember, some storms don't break you, they bring you home.